a sight to behold. His vestments were rich. "Robert!" Edward barked as he claimed his seat. "Yes, sire." A servant moved to his side with alacrity. "Fetch me, Marie." Much to Balin's surprise, the servant didn't rush off at once to do the king's bidding, but hesitated, an alarmed expression on his face. "Did you not hear me, Robert?" Edward growled. "Fetch me, Marie." Swallowing heavily, the servant nodded and acquiesced, backing reluctantly away. Balin and Osgood exchanged raised eyebrows. Both men had heard tales of the lovely Marie, the king's goddaughter and much fated favourite. It was said she was stunningly beautiful, with bright blue eyes and golden hair and a sweet smile. It was said the king had been charmed by her upon first sight, and had doted on the girl since her arrival at court after the death of her parents, Lord and Lady Somerdale. It was also said he'd spoiled her rotten, and that the girl was a horrible brat. In fact, her actions had earned her that very nickname at court. Judging by the servant's reaction to the idea of merely fetching the female, it seemed gossip must be true. "Becker!" Edward barked, and an aide stepped quickly to his side. "Aye, sire," the man murmured. "Is there something amiss, sire?" "Aye," Edward announced heavily. "My wife has decided 'tis time for Marie to marry." "Ah." The servant was well trained and merely arched one eyebrow, pursed his lips, then breathed. "Oh dear." "Aye, exactly," Edward muttered. "This news is not going to be well received by the child." Nay, I fear it will not," the servant admitted carefully. The king's expression was glum. "However, she is well past the age of marriage, sire," Becker pointed out. "Perhaps 'tis indeed time she marry." Edward sighed. "Aye, 'tis time. There was no way for me to win the argument with my wife and convince her to put off the matter." Becker murmured. A moment later, he said, "Well, perhaps Marie will take it better than we fear, sire. As I say, she is well past the age when young women usually wed. Surely she's realised it would eventually come to pass that she would be forced to do so. Mayhap she's already resigned herself to it." "Do not be ridiculous," the king snapped. "We have given her everything she has ever wanted, and never once made her do a thing she did not wish. Why would she imagine that would change?" "Aye, this is true, my lord," Becker agreed. "And I fear by all accounts that Lady Marie does not wish to marry. She has said as much on several occasions." Edward nodded unhappily. "I am not looking forward to the coming interview." "No, I would imagine not, sire," Becker said. "She is a charming child, but can be quite difficult at times." "Indeed, my lord." King Edward shifted in his seat, then muttered, "Stay close. I may need you." "As you wish, my lord." The moment the two men fell silent, Osgood clutched Balin's arm and whispered excitedly, "Did you hear that?" Balin nodded slowly. "It would seem the king is finally going to force the brat to marry." "Aye," Osgood murmured. "Aye." He was briefly lost in thought, then pointed out, "She is very rich." Balin peered at him with dismay. "You were not thinking that She is very rich," Osgood interrupted. "And we do need a rich bride to bring Castle Gaynor back to its former glory." Unhappily, Gaynor Castle was in desperate need of coin to rescue it from ruin. The Black Plague had, in laying waste to a good portion of England, decimated the Gaynor and its nearby village. Half of the servants and villagers had died in horrifying waves of pustules and fever. Most of the other half had fled, either out of fear or in search of happier circumstances. There was only one solution: finding their own villages and servants ravaged by the plague. Many wealthier lords had given in to desperation and offered high wages to anyone who would work for them. These were the lords who'd replaced the people they'd lost to disease. Gaynor had once been a wealthy estate. Unfortunately, Balin's father had spent a great deal of gold on installing a new fish pond 2 years earlier, and that had been followed by a wet season the summer before the plague, which had further eaten up their resources. By the time the Black